friends. My name is Caroline Kohles. I'm the Director of Health and Wellness at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan and Program Coordinator for Northwell Health's Edmund J. Safra Parkinson's Wellness Program here at the JCC. Welcome to Broadway's Best for Parkinson's. This program is supported by a community grant from the Parkinson's Foundation. I want to start by thanking all our guests for sharing their talents with us and helping us get the word out about our JCC Parkinson's program. Anyone living with PD can participate in our program from anywhere. We will put a link to all our programs in the chat so that you can check out all our offerings. Our show tonight is about the power of music. Our celebrity co-host is American TV journalist and theater critic, Roma Torre. You may know Roma from cable news channel NY1, where she spent 28 years as the midday anchor and the chief theater critic. She co-created and contributed to NY1 On Stage, the channel's weekly theater program, and has been seen and reviewed more than 3,000 productions, right? Oh my gosh, that's a lot of shows, most of them on Broadway. What you may not know is that Roma is married to Eduardo Lopez, a writer who is living with Parkinson's, and she is the mother of their two children, Alejandro and Allegra. She is a colon cancer survivor and has been a very outspoken advocate for early screening as well, and she is the celebrity ambassador for the American Cancer Society. Welcome to Broadway's Best, Roma, and thank you so much for joining me as co-host tonight.
Thank you, Caroline. I as you mentioned, my husband is living with Parkinson's, and so it's very near and dear to my heart to be involved in this symposium. I have to say that music, as we are going to discover tonight, is uniquely magical in that it can evoke very strong emotions, but at the same time, it physiologically can impact the body and the mind. And so we are here to explore exactly how that happens, but I think more importantly, how music can help people people living with Parkinson's can cope with their symptoms.
Speaking of, managing symptoms, when we first met, you told me a story that happened, I think, recently, where your husband, who, as you mentioned, has Parkinson's, was able to kind of get up and dance with you when a song came on. Was that song from your wedding, or how did that happen?
Yeah, well, there was one day I was playing music on our stereo, and the Etta James song At Last came on, and we had played that at our wedding, and my husband really is not able to walk on his own, and he stood up and offered to dance, and we actually danced to the music, and that's something he hadn't done in a very, very long time, and it kind of, recharged the synapse in his brain that he was able to move much better than he had up until that point. So I try to put as much music on as possible, but I'm really, obviously, I'm an amateur at all of this. I don't know what music can do, but I'm so eager to find out the mechanics and the science of music and how it really does impact the brain.
Well, we're going to ask Dr. Tomeno to explain, Connie, to talk about a little bit about that very incident, because I think she's going to have some insight when we introduce her a bit later. But right now, what I'd like to do is introduce our medical director and advisor and dear friend, Dr. Alessandro Di Rocco. Alex, as he prefers to be called, is a much loved and world-renowned, respected neurology specialist in New York City. He's an expert in Parkinson's disease and other movement disorders, and is the professor of neurology at the Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra Northwell and system director, neurology, Parkinson's and movement disorders at Northwell Health. All that to say, he knows a lot. Alex is the reason our Parkinson's program exists. He lives near our building on Amsterdam and 76th Street, and he approached our CEO about creating a PD program here at the JCC 16 years ago. Welcome, Alex. Thanks for joining us tonight. Can you kind of contextualize for us a little bit, as a neurologist, the power of music and what we're going to be speaking about tonight with Roma?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, for being, again, able to participate in this. And I wanted to sort of tie to some of your words. when you say he knows a lot, well, I don't know a lot about music and the brain. I know what I hear, which is many times stories like Roma just mentioned. As one patient one time described to me like a magic wind that can be turned on and allows me to move, or allows me to talk, or allows me to communicate, or a magic wind of the spirit that allows to sort of lift, mood, or sometimes even the power of thinking. Now, this to say that we know more empirically about what music does than we know about the biology of the music. So we know a lot, and a lot of what we know is because people who experience music, people who participate in music-based exercise classes, people who make music, people who utilize music, sort of recount and gather the experience, and actually bring back to the world of science and medicine. And we're certainly learning. And actually, I'm glad that today there will be two young scientists who are sort of doing what is needed, because it's beautiful to have sort of an instrument. If we understand in depth how that instruments can sort of intersect certain waves of the brain and function to become this sort of magic wind, then perhaps we can better utilize and have a better understanding about how music can be a treatment for this disease.
You know, I recently discovered that music therapy is relatively new to the science community, and I think people might tend to dismiss it, or at least not take it all that seriously. But from what I'm gathering, we are here to disabuse folks of that notion. But I want to ask you, from a medical standpoint, how is music used to help people with everyday functioning? How does that work?
The way is used, and the way is increasingly used. And again, this is a grassroots sort of treatment that has emerged. I think there are sort of three kind of core elements. One is that music as a way to probably compensate in the brain on the ability to generate rhythmic movement or sustain. Like, for instance, the walking requires a lot of work on the part of the brain to generate, that kind of synchronous movement. Has to be a function of timing. And music can provide that element as a natural sort of inclination to move the body and to adopt the beat of the music and to translate that into a movement. Now, in Parkinson, one of the many metaphors of Parkinson is really like this cage, this sort of restraint that prevents the movement from expressing itself. Then you can imagine how music can actually undo that, and you can borrow the rhythm to generate a rhythm that the brain cannot do it. Another way in which music express itself in everybody, Parkinson or non-Parkinson, is one of the accompany, or one of the dimension of music is the voice that comes with that. And in a lot of times, people with Parkinson have trouble, again, generating that precise sequence of sounds, which has an element of timing, which is very precise. And we're learning that many times people can sing and can express their thoughts through sort of a melody or utilizing music as a vehicle for the voice, while they cannot talk. They cannot just sort of express a sentence without that sustained, again, magical wind of music. A third element is the elements that we all experience. We all have ways in which music accompanies us in our emotions, accompanies us in our way of expressing. And to this degree, I think we'll hear today some interesting research on the fact that sometimes music can actually be an instrument to sort of lift our thoughts, our mood, our spirit, or perhaps our motivation.
Caroline, along with music comes dance, right?
Absolutely.
Going to tell us all about the magic of music and dance.
Well, as you know, teach NIA for people living with Parkinson's and NIA in general, which is a movement-based program. And one of my beloved colleagues is David Leventhal. And I thank you and Alex for getting this conversation started. Are you familiar with the Dance for PD program? It's pretty amazing, Roma.
I don't know quite how it works, but as you know, I mentioned, or we discussed it a little bit earlier, I got my husband up on his feet, and it was something he wasn't able to do before. And it was that song that jarred him into a musical reverie.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, I think you're going to enjoy this clip, everyone. Last week, I talked with David Leventhal. He's the founding teacher and program director for Dance for PD. Dance for PD offers internationally acclaimed research-backed dance classes for people with Parkinson's disease online in New York City and through a network of partners and associates in more than 300 communities in 25 countries. In Dance for PD classes, participants are empowered to explore movement and music in ways that are refreshing, enjoyable, stimulating, and creative.
David, thank you so much for joining us and for talking with us about something that I know is a passion of yours, which is music. It's such an integral part of Dance for PD. What have you learned or noticed about the influence of music and movement when it comes to Parkinson's?
Well, Caroline, music is the underpinning for everything that we do in the Dance for PD class. I think that comes out of the fact that, first of all, for many cultures, music and dance are intertwined. They're inseparable. And so, dance really is a physicalized form of music. Our bodies become the instrument. I think for us, music serves several purposes, and that's why it's so valuable. The first is that it is the rhythmic soul of what we do. It's the heart of what we do. It tells our dancers how quickly or slowly to move. It provides a template for taking steps. It gives us a sense of duration. How long do movements take? And when some of our participants may be missing an internal sense of those elements, to have those considerations or those inputs given externally can be incredibly useful. When they come into the class and they have choreography to work with and music that is supporting that movement, the steps and the rhythmic structure of those steps becomes clear, it becomes strong, and so people are able to locomote in ways that might be more difficult outside of the studio because music is working to support them. So we will use music and specific rhythms and tempi to support specific types of walking, traveling, and other kinds of movement. Number two, I would say that music plays a role in how we execute a certain movement quality. It's something we focus on a lot because when we focus on movement quality as dancers, it gives us a sense of control over our movements. It also gives us a sense of being able to access movement no matter our mobility or flexibility. So when we talk about quality, I can do quality with a hand. I can do quality with shoulders. I can do quality with just my eyes. Right? Is this slow, lyrical, graceful, fluid movement? Is this sharp, staccato, punched movement? I can use my words to describe that, but it's so much clearer and more powerful when that physical, qualitative connection comes and is driven by the music. Number three, music is a mood changer. So whatever music you're hearing, we tend to be drawn emotionally to that world. Why and how am I moving in this way? And it gives us a motivation for moving. What are we trying to express with our bodies, and how are we trying to reflect what we're hearing? And the last I would say is memory or nostalgia. We have a special connection to it. We have an emotional connection to it. And that can sometimes make it easier to move to that music, even if we have never done the choreography before, because there's something very comfortable embedded within that music.
Amazing. It sounds to me like you're talking about music being the connective tissue, right? That's in between, that seeps in between everything and makes things flow and makes things, the quality change, almost harmonizes our brain.
Absolutely. Music is the connective tissue, but it is also it's also the tissue itself. Oliver Sacks's amazing writing on what he experienced in the clinic in Awakenings. One of his patients talks about Parkinsonism. She doesn't actually have Parkinson's disease, but it's a Parkinsonian syndrome. She talks about that as making her feel unmusicked, as if all of the music has left her body. And one of the things I think we can do in a dance setting is to re-music the body, to rebuild that connection between the music that we're hearing, the music that's all around us, and a physical expression that relates very deeply to it. And I think that's very powerful. It gives people a sense of agency. It gives them a sense of control. It says to them, I can do this because I have music as my mentor.
You also have a Sing for PD program. And why is that? Why did you want to expand the Dance for PD program into Sing for PD?
The Sing for PD program really came out of the dance class. We noticed that as people were dancing, they started singing along to the songs. And we loved that, and we wanted to encourage people to sing more and actually to be able to focus just on their singing. So it started as sort of a spin-off from the dance program and then became its own program. The principle is the same. Broadway trained singer who is teaching the art of singing as a way into how we might use our voice expressively, how we might communicate the emotional tone of the music, just as we do in the dance class. So the two go together very, very closely, and people still sing in the dance class. In fact, I think they're louder and more expressive now that they have the specialized Sing for PD class as well. One of the great things about the multi-level approach to music is that you may not be attuned to the rhythm or to the specific counts. You may not have a particular relationship to the music you're hearing, but you are awakened to the narrative in that story. So there's something in the music for everybody, and then it's our job as the teaching artist to make sure there's something in the movement that's given for everybody.
Yeah, and it's known as movement and music as the universal language. Right? And you said that you had a few things that you wanted to demonstrate for us.
So Caroline, I wanted to show very brief samples of how music can directly inform the mood and quality and motivation for our movement. I'm going to show a few very short clips just to show you how quickly we can change gears and go to these different worlds of expression and movement. So we're going to start out with a tango, music by Piazzolla, and the rhythm and elasticity of this music informs how I'm moving and what I'm imagining. I'm doing a partner dance. Right? Then I'm going to shift to some music by Brahms, which is used by Mark Morris in a piece called Love Song Waltzes. So lots of yearning. This is movement that comes from the heart. You're reaching to somebody you love. And the music informs the quality I'm using, the degree of stretch and reach. A very sharp, bright Irish reel. This music is very square, very structured. So I know exactly when the phrases are going to start and end. And it's a joy to dance to a jazzy version of Cool from West Side Story, and we can be Sharks and Jets. So I don't have to tell the story because the quality and aggressive quality of the movement is right in there. Music tells me I have to be ready for anything, ready to rumble. And it's punchy. And then I can finish with something really soft. Here again, I can flow through. It's gentle. It's quiet. And I can adjust my movement quality, my whole aura, to reflect what I'm hearing. And our dancers with Parkinson's can do the same. They have the tools in music to control what they want to say with their bodies and how they want to move with their bodies. And that is the beautiful magic of music. So I'm going to stop there. I could go on for hours about that, but that is the sort of the way that we integrate music into the class to create these different emotional and expressive and physical worlds. It is that lifeblood, and a lot of what we work on in the Dance for PD class is really being able to respond emotionally, physically, socially, right, as a group to what we're hearing, what we're listening to. And that's the beauty of the connection between dance and music. I just want to finish with a famous quote by George Balanchine, who was one of the most musical choreographers ever to have worked. And he said, when you go to a performance, you should see the music and hear the dance. They should be so intertwined that there's no difference between them. And that's really what we try to do in the Dance for PD class as well.
And what I love about what you've just illustrated, David, is that whether you have Parkinson's or not, music supports life, right? And the ability to respond, right, to music enhances one's life and one's life force. Thank you so much for joining us today and for that wonderful demonstration of the power of music.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Wow. David is a life force unto himself. I'm so impressed with that. It's just incredible what he's able to get people living with Parkinson's to do, no matter how bad their disability is at that or whatever stage they're in. And you should just see the joy on the people's faces. It's just pure abandon. So it's lovely. But David had mentioned Oliver Sacks, and he is or was a great neurologist who did some groundbreaking work with music and the brain. And for those folks who may not recognize the name, I think David did mention, he is the model for the Robert De Niro character in the film Awakenings. De Niro actually won an Academy Award for his performance. That will lead us to our next guest, Concetta Connie Tomeno. She's a music therapist, and she worked very closely with Oliver Sacks. They co-founded the I'm going to read this, the IMNF, the Institute for Music and Neurologic Function, together. Now, sadly, Dr. Sacks passed away about 7 years ago, but the Institute is still going strong. And so I'm real eager to hear what Connie has to tell us.
Yeah, I can't wait for you to meet Connie. She is a friend of the JCC. She's been, I first met her at the Parkinson's Foundation Allied Team in Training, and I was fascinated. In fact, Connie, I don't know if I told you this, but I think if I started my career over again, I would be a music therapist. It's just what you do is amazing. Through your work at IMNF, you have advanced the state of the art and science of music therapy for individuals suffering from brain trauma, including stroke, or those that are afflicted with degenerative neurological diseases like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. And I just find this fascinating, this idea of, even if we could start with what Roma experienced with her own husband, where he heard at last and suddenly he stood up and started to dance. if you could talk to us about this power of music to just motivate us and get us up on our feet.
Wow. Well, it's so interesting, and David too explained it so nicely and demonstrated with the videos. One of the things that Oliver and I had observed over 40 years ago was the fact that music can stimulate residual movement ability in everybody, and that happens because of the way the auditory system is stimulated by sound, and that sound then turns on the motor function. Somebody with Parkinson's may struggle, get stiff, not be able to move. As soon as they hear the music, the impetus for movement and the will to move, in fact, Oliver wrote about this, the will to move seems to come back to them. And in that moment, they're mobile again. And it's so all driven by this rhythmic pattern that the brain is able to utilize to then help with not only the initiation of movement, but then the sustaining of that movement as long as the music's playing. If that experience is continued, if the person is able to use the music in their movement, in their speech, in their singing, that those abilities, the movement, the motor function, the vocal integrity gets sustained long term because the person is using more of the resources they have available to them.
That's actually incredible, Roma, right? That means that if her husband kept singing at last, are you saying, and moving, that would continue?
That his voice would get stronger and it'd be more intelligible, and the volume of the voice would be stronger. Alex talked about the patterning of voice, that speech is pattern of sound. And so sometimes the person can't themselves put together the sequence of words or the modem mechanism of speech. But if they sing, those mechanisms come in sync automatically without thinking. And many times I say that music allows somebody to do without thinking. And for so many people with neurologic problems, it's the thinking and the planning that gets in the way of doing. The brain has all these mechanisms and networks already in place to allow that music then to bring this type of function back.
Yeah, it really is miraculous. Earlier, we were all talking about that 60 Minutes segment with Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett, and how he's experiencing symptoms of dementia, and it comes in and out. But when he's singing, and we saw, they were a little nervous that when he was performing at Carnegie Hall, Lady Gaga was standing by to sort of bail him out. But as soon as he stepped on stage, it was like he was a young man again, and he was just singing full-throated and singing his heart out. And again, how do you explain that? I mean, what is going on there that enables again to be able to sing clearly?
Again, there's his lived experience, his years and years of singing this music is so much a part of who he is, and the resources, the neurologic resources in his brain, to be able to pull that together and to be able to sing those songs he knows so well. What broadcast was two things. One was that when he was performing at home with his pianist, he was able to still be creative and change the music around. So he wasn't just robotically repeating the song that he knew. He was actually still being able to turn it and change it in the moment. So even with Alzheimer's, he's able to be creative and express himself. The other piece that was extraordinary was the fact that when he was on stage and Lady Gaga came on stage, he announced to the audience, he goes, "Oh, everyone, here's Lady Gaga." Now, the reason why I think that happened was because there's something that happens when you're involved in music, or when you sort of warm up with something or warm up the brain. He might not have recognized it at the beginning of the concert, but because he was singing, that singing actually warmed up and sort of primed his memory and recall, so that when she came on stage, his brain was already charged up and he was able to say her name. And
Wow.
So we see that with people with all types of neurocognitive deficits, that just participating, being active in the music, activates enough networks in the brain to allow that person then to recognize a loved one, to remember their name, to remember something else.
No, that's true. Because when we saw earlier in the segment, he didn't remember her, and
That's
then
right. Yep, that's exactly why that happened.
There she was.
Yeah.
You had also mentioned something that was pretty incredible when we were speaking earlier, that music, unlike anything else, touches on all systems of the brain, or stimulates all systems of the brain. And you said there's nothing else that does that, not art or anything else. How can that be harnessed in a therapeutic way?
Sure. Well, one of the things, when you think about art and you think about visual stimuli, that to be able to process that is a very highly cognitive, so top of the brain, more advanced levels of cognitive processing. Music is comprised of rhythm. It's actually vibrations in the air. And those vibrations are patterns that then stimulate cells within our ear to vibrate at certain frequencies. So there's the pitch of the music, the actual tone of the music that gets processed in a certain part of the brain, the pattern of the sound that gets processed by several parts of the brain, both as a way of regulating time, as well as stimulating some of the motor areas of the brain. Then there's all the emotional associations that we have with music, both natural responses to music as well as learned responses to music. And then there's the memories and association. So if you did a brain scan of somebody playing a musical instrument, if you could, you'd see every part of the brain light up at the same time. It's just an amazing thing. And the reason why music therapy, which has been around as a profession in the United States since the 1950s, it's coming into its own, especially in the past 10 years, but very much so now because we have the science to support some of these more specific applications, is the fact that music and these applications of music can really reach people who have certain types of deficits in the brain where they can get access to those abilities.
I wanted to bring back Dr. Dirocco just to talk about neuroplasticity, because Connie, it seems to me like what you're talking about is the ability of the brain to be plastic, to learn new things. And we also have this dopamine, right? That the dopamine cells the cells that are producing that are dying off with somebody in Parkinson's, but music stimulates dopamine. So I want the two of you to tease that out a little bit and tell us why it's so important to have engage in activities that increase our dopamine and how that works.
Well, this goes back again to a discussion we had earlier on, which engaged all of us. We were wondering about the mechanism of music. How do we translate that moment into something more lasting, more enduring? And of course, it's important to have that instrument. If that instrument can instigate, that the kind of sparkle in the brain or that connectivity in the brain, how do we maintain that? And that is a concept we have discussed many other times in this forums. The fact that, one of the great instruments that the brain has in Parkinson or in life in general is that the brain can sort of regenerate connections, even in neurodegenerative diseases. When you lose those connectivity, the brain can actually find a way to create new pattern, new connections. And the way the brain does it is by exposure, by finding ways in which a certain activity, a certain motor pattern, a certain intellectual pattern, a certain skill becomes then ingrained into the brain. The muscle memory is not in the muscles, it's in the brain. And music could be a fantastic instrument to sort of be the generator, the genesis, or the motor for this renewed connectivity, which means, lasting effect, lasting beneficial effect.
We had a comment from Rachel Corman who said, it seems odd that music hasn't been a part of clinical trials. There have been trials for related issues such as tango and other dance forms, but has it been used in musical trials?
There's been quite a bit of research in rhythm and the use of rhythm in movement disorders, and that's pretty well established. Those studies are over 10 years old that actually show, both from a neuroscience point of view, which part of the brains are stimulated and the patterns of sound generated into movements. And then there's been studies on using of rhythmic cueing, like auditory stimulation, in the sustaining of motor function or gait and the ease of gait in people with Parkinson's long term. And those studies have been studied. Sometimes people don't find them because it talks just about rhythm as opposed to music. And in science, sometimes you can't use the word, or at least it used to be you couldn't use the word music because NIH won't fund it, but now they do. So it would be like patterns of sound or auditory stimuli. And so you won't find those research studies because of the word music might not be specific to it. But those types of studies have been done. I think what's happening now, because of the interest from the NIH, is that there's the funding to do very large clinical trials, and in conjunction with music therapists around the country, to look at the clinical impact of music in these very specific applications, and not only look at the immediate effect, but the long-term effect.
When you're working with an individual who has Parkinson's, what do you do precisely? From a practical perspective, how much time do you need to work with them? And I had heard Dr. Di Rocco say earlier, it's transformative. Music can be transformative. How do you get to that stage? How does somebody become transformed through music who is living with Parkinson's?
Sure. Well, in music therapy, we're going to look at the individual and see where they need help the most. And so if it's in balance and gait, of course, they're probably seeing the physical therapist and the speech language pathologist, but we're going to work with them in that moment to, if it's walking, to find a rhythm that they can feel the beat to, and then see how that allows them to walk with more control and more immediacy. And then find if there's music with that beat that they know, something that they're able to sing to themselves that gives them a tool that they can take home and use on their own to be able to sustain that ease of walking. If they're having trouble with the volume of their voice or the intelligibility of their voice, we may do some singing too. Some people with Parkinson's lose the ability to feel the beat. There's actually a change in the part of the brain that processes patterns of sound. And so for that person, they may not just be able to listen to any song and dance and move. It has to be something that has a beat that they can respond to. So we may nuance where that accent in the music is to allow that to happen. We also do a lot of live music making interactions. We may have drums, we may have different kinds of tone instruments to allow the person to express themselves, to give them a chance to share feelings in a way that maybe they can't do. And music therapists are also trained in psychotherapy. So if there's a master's level music therapist who also does psychotherapeutic work, we may get deeper into some of those feelings and sense of self that the person needs to deal with too. So it's not just about movement and speech and cognition. It may really get down to some of the emotions and responses and sense of self that the person is dealing with too. So we can offer a lot in music therapy.
What an amazing conversation. Connie, I could listen to you forever, but we do have some additional guests, Roma. Let's introduce Mikey Jose, who has received many opportunities to share his passion about validating the crucial role that music plays in everyday life and in clinical settings as a featured TEDx speaker and director of the UBC Brain and Music Group. So Mikey, come on. There you are.
Are you there?
Caroline. Hi, Roma.
Okay. Hi, Mikey. Thanks for being part of this. I know you're a singer, and we can't discuss music therapy without mentioning the role of singing in the sessions. And we've been talking mostly about listening to music, but what about the function of actively performing it? As somebody who does perform it in your research, what happens in the brain when you introduce the element of singing?
Right. So I can kind of start off by saying that my musical background kind of has informed my research interests and vice versa. So outside of my academic pursuits, I am a professional singer. and recording artist. And so over the years, I've been able to create and compose music and perform it as well. And that is through kind of these actions and activities was really when I started to notice really the true impact of music in the brain and music on the body, as you have been mentioning throughout this day. So in terms of kind of how my performance side of things have impacted the way that I look at my research is really trying to see how music, emotion, movement kind of come together and interact within the brain and how the brain processes all these things. The brain really, especially when you're creating music and when you're engaging with music and making music, especially with music therapists, almost the entire brain is being used, which is an amazing, amazing thing from your prefrontal cortex, which is more of decision-making and things like that. But then kind of going deeper into more primal structures of the brain. So things that process emotion and movement. It's really interesting to see that both by listening to music and by engaging with music, you kind of see these, your brain lighting up, which is what I'm more excited to venture into in my research.
Mikey, thank you so much for your insights. I can't wait to bring on your colleague, Dr. Matthew Sacheli, who is the research program manager of the British Columbia Brain Wellness Program. Dr. Sacheli, or Matthew, as he prefers to be called, has a background in clinical neuroscience, kinesiology, and exercise physiology, and you are working together on a study that sounds so interesting about the role of music and how that can be used to treat apathy, which of course we know apathy is different than depression. Apathy, and correct me, Matthew, if I'm wrong, is more about the motivation, right? And depression is more of a state. Can you tease that out for us and tell us a little bit about your research study?
Yeah, thank you to you both and you and Roma for having me on today to talk about our research. And we decided to go after apathy because it's such a prevalent condition that we see in people with Parkinson's disease. You know, early on in the disease, we see it affecting a quarter of the population. And as the disease progresses, it affects more and more people. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we can use something as simple as music and just listening to music to help those people with motivation, which can then trickle down to so many different other things that happen with Parkinson's disease. So that's why we decided to go after apathy, because this has so many follow-on effects. You know, if we can listen to just music, maybe that's going to help someone more regularly take their medication, or help someone go to a walk, or get up with their husband and dance. And if something as simple as music, just listening to their favorite song, might help with that apathy, I think it will have a huge widespread effect.
Connie, I wonder if you can pop back on and tell us what you think might be the outcome of this wonderful research project. We don't know what it's going to be, but do you have any sense of, or any predictions?
Well, I'm very excited by the research for sure, because apathy and just the ability to have the will to initiate and to participate is so important. And we know that music that somebody loves actually generates positive chemicals in the brain that can improve mood. So we know it can improve mood. Now, if that mood can improve to such a degree that the person is able to feel that they can contribute again, get active again in their life, that would be wonderful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for joining us. And did you want to introduce someone who's actually an amazing Broadway composer and musician who's here tonight to talk with us about his experience?
Hey, David Loud is in the house. He is I don't know David personally, but I certainly know his work. I've seen every show that he's ever done over his decades as a musical composer, arranger, conductor, extensive Broadway credits. He did The Visit, starring Chita Rivera and Roger Rees, saw that one, along with Scottsboro Boys, Sondheim on Sondheim, Curtains, Ragtime, A Class Act, Steel Pier, and revivals of Porgy and Bess, She Loves Me, Company, and Sweeney Todd. He's also had the unique distinction of having originated 3 roles on Broadway as an actor in Merrily We Roll Along, Masterclass, and Curtains. Saw all that too. He's currently teaching at the Manhattan School of Music, where he is the music director of the new musical theater program, which he helped found in 2017. And he wrote a book. It's called Facing the Music, a Broadway Memoir. It was just published by Regan Arts. I didn't read the whole thing. I didn't have time, but I did read a lot. And he's here to share his story as someone whose life has been immersed in music, living with Parkinson's. And David, we want to welcome you to Broadway's Best. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for the help.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
In the show, I mean, I love that when we approached you about doing the show and we told you that Dr. Dirocco was going to be on the show, and you said, you had me at Dr. Dirocco. And I love that. And, he mentioned music and the voice, and you created vocal arrangements and you spent your career working with singers. Is there anything you'd like to share that you've learned about collaboration and kind of creating community? Music feels to me like the ideal way to create community. People are all contributing to make the sound harmonize.
And as the conductor of a Broadway show, I'm in the center of that. I'm the beating heart of a musical. And maybe it's 70 people working together who are depending on me to allow them to work as one. And the tools of my craft are people's voices. It feels like I'm in the center. I call it the privileged vortex of the podium. This is a little passage from my book I wanted to read. On my podium, I'm at the focal point of 3 distinct worlds. From the pit, I look up at the actors, who aim their performances over my head, occasionally glancing down at me to ensure that we are synchronized. I see their shoes, mostly, if they're downstage close to me. But as they move upstage, I see them clearly, and I hear the rustle of their costumes and the breaths they take to sing. Below me is the orchestra, packed tightly into the pit, every inch of space a negotiated treaty. The musicians divide their focus between the music on their stands and the baton in my right hand, which tells them when and how fast to play. I tell them other things with my left hand and my body. I try to physically embody the style of the music we are playing, encouraging the players to join me in the spirit of that style. Behind me, unseen but always felt, is the audience. I feel them on the back of my neck. I sense their attention and their boredom. I hear their laughs and their coughs. I try to watch the show through their new eyes and listen through their fresh ears. The intersecting energy of these 3 worlds is heady, intoxicating. The thrill of making music overwhelms me. I am hyper alert, monitoring conditions in 3 directions. I have rituals that I repeat at every performance. Eye contact with one actor as he launches his high note. A wink at an actress when her first joke gets a laugh. A cue I always give to the drummer in a particular way, guaranteeing that he will strike his triangle at the precise moment that the ingenue and the juvenile kiss. I raise my hands high to cue the ensemble for a vocal entrance or help them cut off precisely. Occasionally I conduct towards the camera so the stage manager can synchronize lighting cues with my tempos. I breathe with the singers. The musicians breathe with me. On a good night, we become entwined, lifting each other into effortless flight.
Wow.
It's an extraordinary place to be on the podium for a Broadway show.
Wow. David, you know what? You're not only a wonderful conductor and music director, but you're a terrific writer. Did you know you had it?
Thank you.
We should point out you are living with Parkinson's. I'm not quite sure when you were diagnosed, but I'm curious, how has your relationship to music, which obviously is so important in your life, you live for music, how has your relationship to music changed since you were diagnosed?
Well, music has always been essential to me for artistic reasons, and now I feel like it's essential to me for health reasons. I firmly believe, with no empirical evidence to support this, that the existence of music in my life has made my Parkinson's progress more slowly than it might have. I'm so lucky to have that sort of already up and running in my consciousness as something essential to live by. I think it's eased my path.
I would love to bring Alex and Connie back on to actually address that, because I think there's some evidence that what you are experiencing is not uncommon. Connie, can you comment on that?
David, what you just said, as a conductor, as a music director, obviously you're moving all the time. In fact, conductors move more than the musicians most.
It's what we do. We move for a living.
But you move rhythmically too, and you move with expression. And so we talked about how the sustaining of that movement actually enhances dopamine production, even if there's limited dopamine making cells. That just that energy and exercise of movement allows more of that dopamine to be produced. And so as long as you're able to conduct and do that, you're exercising all those necessary muscles and joints to allow to sustain that as much as possible. And the fact that you, like you said, that your Parkinson, you think is slowly progressing. I've seen that clinically with people I've worked with over the years, is that the more they're able to move, whether it's cycling or dancing, just the act of moving in a very rhythmic, consistent way and sustaining that helps them through other aspects of the day. They don't freeze as much. They don't have as broad on-off periods in between medications. It sort of eases everything along the way.
And Dr. Dirocco, is that because we have more dopamine that we're producing when we're listening and making music, singing to music, doing all those kind of things? Is that because, like David was talking about, it is the connective tissue? Or is there more that we need to know about that? Or as Connie was saying, it kind of warms up the brain and we work that way?
Probably all of the above. And I think that one way to think of this is that in science, we don't have anything specific in science. We don't have anything yet. So I'm happy that studies are coming up. But certainly we know that an active brain is going to resist the disease in a better way than a brain that is sort of disengaged from life, from a physical point of view, an intellectual point of view, an emotional point of view. Going back to music, which is the sort of this connector, this lifter that brings movement, brings cognitive and emotional energy, and in general engages the brain in a very active way. There is this element which is intuitive that is certainly. It could be one of the instruments. It could be one of the instruments that will translate into an applicable ways of delaying the disease progression and then sustaining the brain activity.
Amazing.
I think that, as Connie said, we have that empirical evidence. Other people who have maintained an engaged life with all these elements, as I said, music, sort of bring them all up, certainly have better ways and resist the disease or face the disease in a much better way, and likely have a slower progression and avoid certain complications of the disease.
David was able to carry on in his work despite the disability from his Parkinson's. And I loved in the book, David, you mentioned you needed to make a slight accommodation when I believe you were conducting the visit. You sat down, right?
Yes,
and
that was a big event for me to start sitting while conducting, and it made it possible for me to do that whole run.
And I think that's a lesson that we all have to learn. We can carry on. We just have to do it slightly different in a different way. So bravo to you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And Connie, we were talking about that earlier. As a musician that's aging, I know as a dancer that's aging, that there's an acceptance of, wait a second, some things are going to change, and how we still stay engaged with what we love to do and get the pleasure from it because it's so good for the brain. It's like a brain shower, right? When we're listening to music or engaging in artistic endeavors. Do you want to say anything about that?
I do, and I want to encourage. One of the things that's really important is that all of us are creative, and all of us should make music, and all of us should dance, and all of us should sing. And if anybody told you when you were younger that you couldn't sing, forget about it, because all of us should do that, because it sustains us, it allows us to be part of a community and experience the beauties of life. Musicians, I hope, especially as they age and aren't able to play at the standard that they have, still find ways of playing music and finding ways of making music, because it's so crucial to who they are.
And we have a musician, a singer tonight who's going to close out our show. Lenny Watts is in the house. Our show, of course, wouldn't be complete if there wasn't some actual singing on there. So thank you guys for joining us. He's a multi-award-winning cabaret performer, and he's been recognized as an outstanding vocalist, director, producer, and booking manager. He's been active in the New York cabaret scene for over 20 years, touring nationally and internationally in productions of The Music Man, The Wizard of Oz, The Drowsy Chaperone, and Guys and Dolls. Audience especially love his concerts at Town Hall. I love the titles of these. Broadway Unplugged and Broadway by the Year 1949. Lenny, welcome to the show. Thank you for choosing and closing our act, to being our closing act tonight. I just wanted to mention that you, like me, have been impacted by Parkinson's because you have a family member who had Ph.D. And I'm here in honor of my Uncle John Latham. And I understand you're singing on behalf of your brother Bob, who had Parkinson's, who was a musician too. You're from a musical family. And you told me the story that he loved to play the drums and then stopped doing that for a while. And then when he got Parkinson's, he went back to it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much. I've been on many panels and never have I been so fascinated by the discussion that's going on. I mean, I know nothing about any of this except I watched someone that I love and respect and looked up to, go through some really terrible things. So I'm really thrilled to be here in his honor. Yeah, he was a drummer. I come from a fairly musical family. We all sang or played instruments or did something. And back in the day, he was a drummer. You know, we had the basement band that, he was part of and played drums and sang. And then he kind of stopped doing that for the rest of his life. He was a fire chief. He was a 911 operator. He was an air traffic controller. I mean, he was one of those guys that did all of those amazing things. But when he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, he suddenly wanted to sing again. He wanted to sing. He wanted to sing in a choir. He wanted to sing along with CDs. And he then started to drum again. And he bought himself one of those mini drum sets, that kind of electric mini drum sets that he loved to play and could get back into that rhythm. And it really brought him a tremendous amount of joy. So, yeah, it was a weird thing that it kind of lay dormant for a huge part of his life, and then all came back at the end. And maybe that was just something that he could really relate to and sink into, and it brought him some comfort, and it certainly brought him joy to do.
Lenny, just what you were saying about your brother, how, he was a drummer, right? He was a musician. So I think that part of himself was always there. Being able to gain that back again, even though he had Parkinson's. We spoke about how much being able to be active and playing helps sustain that function. And so it's just a beautiful example that we don't lose the music, that we are musical. And anytime we can bring that back is real important.
And you said it almost helped him come back to himself.
Yeah. I believe the three things that he really had at the end, where he totally had his sense of humor, totally had his love for music and his love for rhythm. That was always there towards the end. I felt like he was his most authentic self when he was doing that kind of stuff.
Wonderful. Well, you're going to sing for us tonight. You picked out a special song. Can you tell us about it?
This song is one of my favorite songs, and I think it doesn't get the due that it is that it should get, because it's generally sung by a very loud 7 or 8-year-old girl, and I'm a very loud, much older man. But for me, this is my mantra. This is my I still think about this, and I think it's what keeps us going, literally. When I'm stuck with a day that's gray and lonely, I just stick out my chin and grin and say, the sun will come out tomorrow. Bet your bottom dollar that tomorrow there'll be sun. Just thinking about tomorrow clears away the cobwebs and the sorrow till there's none. When I'm stuck with a day that's gray and lonely, I just stick out my chin and grin and say, the sun will come out tomorrow, so you gotta hang on till tomorrow. Come what may, tomorrow, tomorrow, I love you tomorrow, you're only a day away. When I'm stuck with a day that's gray and lonely, I just stick out my chin and I grin and I say, the sun will come out tomorrow, so you gotta hang on till tomorrow. Come what may, tomorrow, tomorrow, I love you tomorrow, you're only a day away. Tomorrow, I love you tomorrow, you're only a day away.
Thank you, Lenny. All right. What a great way to end our show. Oh my gosh. There's this conversation, Roma, feels like it just began. I just want to thank you, Roma, so much. We are so honored and lucky that you were able to be the co-host with me tonight. I want to thank all of our guests, Alessandro Dirocco, Connie Tomeno, David Leventhal, Matthew Sacheli, Mikey Jose, David Loud, Lenny Watts, for sharing your time, your talents, your insights, and your heart. I also want to thank the Parkinson's Foundation for their support. This Broadway Best for Parkinson's is supported by a community grant from the Parkinson's Foundation, and we are very grateful to them. A special thank you to the Marlene Meyerson, JCC Manhattan, Northwell Health, Jeff Simmons from Anat Gerstein, and our production manager, Whitney Chapman. We'll be continuing this conversation. We're going to sort of focus on theater and the performing arts and their impact on PD, especially like improvisation and acting. Thank you again for being with us tonight.